Welcome to Suffolk Matters, where all of Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News, opinions, and insights you won't hear anywhere else. Here's your host, the president of New York's largest independent union, Suffolk AME's Dan Leveler.
Welcome to another edition of Suffolk Matters on Walk 97.5 and 94.3 The Shark, where Suffolk County meets the men and women of Suffolk AME. News and views you can't hear anywhere else. So my guest this morning is John Brooks, who is the chair of the Committee on Veterans, Homeland Security, and Military Affairs. Good morning, Senator.
Good morning.
And also joining us today as my co-host, Tom Moran, Executive Vice President from AME. Good morning, Tom.
Good morning, Dan.
So, Senator, you've been a true friend to AME, but also, labor in general, the fire rescue emergency services, all of that. And, thank you for all you do on behalf of everyone, and especially, coming from our perspective, what you do on behalf of working men and women. But for our listeners, obviously you're a senator, but, can we get a little bit of background on, how you found yourself in this position, right? Public service in general and community work and whatever else.
Well, I guess, from a public service standpoint, I got involved in the volunteer fire department back in 1969 is when I first joined. My family has actually been in Seaford since the 1700s. And they were very active in the community for a long time. I never really came to realize why I joined the fire department, but I fell in love with it immediately. And, it's an organization that obviously serves the community in terms of the fire service, but it's also a center point of the community in terms of events. We used to host a 4th of July parade and stuff, and always took a leadership role in events in the community. Back in the 1970s, we were seeing more and more rescue calls. We didn't have a rescue program per se, but the availability of what was then police ambulances sometimes was limited. We got called, and we got involved in the early stages. I happened to be, I became a medic in the Army Reserve National Guard. I went away for training, and when I came back, they were just starting the EMT and AMT programs in Nassau County. So I was in the first class of each, actually, with the fire departments. That grew. I got involved in the community, was talked into running for the school board. I got involved with that and spent a lot of time looking at how we fund schools. Professionally, I worked at the time with Geico and eventually became the director of planning and financial control, which was the guy that did the business plan and the budget. So that was good stuff. Ran a couple of insurance companies. Had an opportunity to go to work for Nassau County, became the director of risk management there, and got involved in a great deal of stuff. At one point, we challenged NYSHIP, the health insurance plan rate increase, I guess it was for 2009, and we got them to roll the rates back $450 million. And then I got punished by the then governor. I was put on an advisory board for the health insurance because we had pointed out where there was a lot of money that could be saved.
Yeah.
And while NYSHIP is not there to make a profit, they were making a profit.
Right.
They had the dividend. Profit is a bad word, but the
You
money received and the payment.
Yeah.
And they had several $1 million there. And I showed them that the reserve that they had, or the excess profit, was in excess of their rate increase. And we argued what rate increase they needed to do. So the folks there said, if you're wrong, how do we pay the bills?
Right.
I says, well, you got X million of dollars here. We're talking about $400 million, $450 million. Take that money out, put it over here as a retro reserve. If you need it, there's the money. I'm wrong, and I'll shut up.
Right.
So we agreed to do that in the end. I think, I don't remember the exact number now, but the state increase was a little over 1%, 1.2 if I'm right. And at the end of the year, we made another 100 million. So we had money there. But it was a situation where they were running a program, but not recognizing what they were doing.
Right.
And they were making a profit because they overestimated certain expenses. So we got them to do the right thing, use the reserves. We protected ourselves. It wasn't that we just took a shot in the dark. The money was there if something went wrong. I had talked to them a bit because with Nassau, we wanted to do a program to help with people's general management of their health and do some, on-site health clinics and the rest. And we discussed doing that. We were going to invest, if I remember right, about $2 million to put clinics in certain of the sites in the county with the workers, and then have people with ongoing problems, blood pressure, whatever, come to be checked. And the folks we talked to showed how much that could save in medical costs. So if I remember right, we were going to invest about $2 million to do that. And what I wanted to do was get our rates cut by $2 million to cover that, but they didn't want to do that, so that fell apart. But we did get the rate reduction done, and that kind of led to people. I was on the school board for a number of years, and people asked me to run.
Yeah, and listen, it's a long, varied history with a ton of different levels of experience. So that, from my perspective, it makes perfect sense that you'd be as efficient as you are because of your grasp of all these different things that you've done throughout your life. We need people in Albany that are going to understand issues. We were talking not too long ago about some issues that people didn't truly understand, on one level, there was work that we were doing for a population of workers across the state where we were trying to raise awareness on. You were very helpful, but then there are other populations where that education is needed. First I'd like to just dive into the 911 operators as first responders in communication, and that bill and what that means and so if you have any insight, I know firsthand what a circus it was this year up in Albany, and then on top of that to try and get legislation like this passed.
Well, in many ways, that legislation is common sense, and kind of I looked at it too. And I don't mean this with any disrespect whatsoever, a bouquet to everybody that was responding to those. We recognized so many different groups that stepped up during the pandemic, but we also took so much for granted and how the system works, and most people don't understand what's going on in emergency. Somebody's calling in, generally excited, trying to give information with limited knowledge of what they're talking about, other than the guy's bleeding or whatever the case might be. For the dispatchers that are taking that incoming call, they're analyzing what's happening, asking for certain critical information, often giving some advice as to what should be done, and then making sure they dispatch the correct agency and whatever information they can feed to that agency during the course of the response. That's important stuff.
And to be a calming presence as well, right? You've got, we talk about incidents like, maybe there's an accident on the roadway. There could be 15, 20 people calling in, all in various levels of panic about what's going on and provide that calming influence, get all the data together, and
So to me, when the request was made, that, my initials, how did we forget these guys?
Right.
And to get that done, but as a state, as communities, we didn't grasp how much contribution there was from so many people, and certainly the role that you play in being the initial coordinator of what could be a catastrophic event is critical.
Absolutely.
And so to me, that bill was a no-brainer.
And we did some, asking around on the street, so to speak, and talking to people and saying, if you call an emergency service and a person picks up the phone and helps you with that emergency, are they a first responder? And everybody said yes, but yet the law didn't recognize that.
Yep.
So being able to not only get that recognized, but in a year like this, with all of the various work that had to be done, the uncertainty at certain points in time, what was federal funding going to be available to handle the necessities of the state? I mean, there was so much going on, and to get a common sense bill like this done, again, very important to us, our members who do that work, but folks across the state who are doing this, from the tip of the New York State all the way out to Montauk. They're all now recognized as, or now can be recognized as first responders as soon as the governor gets around to signing.
Yeah, I'm sure that signature is just around the corner, so to speak. But there's no question how critical it was that you were there. And again, with the pandemic, if you think back, it kind of exploded. You had a couple, and all of a sudden, every place you turn, people are getting sick, and we're seeing a spread. And we're in a situation where our medical facilities were being overrun, and trying to do what we can. And initially, the dream of a vaccination, not one readily available. The lack of PPE and the rest.
Sure.
The challenges that were people. I mean, I looked at in our firehouse, the guys that went on the rescue calls that were confirmed COVID cases. They had everything on, and a look on their face that, like, what's this going to be, kind of thing.
Yeah.
And then when the bus came back, you cleaned it at the hospital and spent a couple of hours more cleaning it. It was serious stuff.
Yeah.
And when it blew up, if you will, in terms of the tremendous number of calls, you're the guys that are coordinating the response and trying to track which hospitals can take more and not. And when you had to move to a mutual aid situation, do that. So important stuff.
Well, Tom and I were talking recently with someone that does work on the state level for the fire service. And they brought up another bill, something that you and I have discussed as well. It's just relating to ambulatory services and the correct way to maybe balance things out across the state so that the taxpayer isn't picking up a particular burden that they necessarily shouldn't. And can you just tell us a little bit about what that bill is and why you believe in it?
Well, basically, first, from a medical standpoint, most of us have either private health insurance or Medicaid, Medicare, the rest. And within those health insurance programs is protection or coverage for ambulance services, number one. So you fund that in your medical premiums when you do that. Over the years, we've allowed certain agencies to recover expenses. I think we started with the police-run agencies where they were allowed to bill dependent on the level of service that was provided, and that was a recovery to the taxpayer. As time went on, the volunteer ambulance companies were given that privilege, and there's an exclusion in the federal law letting that go to the fire departments. Now, the bill would be to allow the fire departments to recover those costs too. And we're in a situation where local communities are funding the fire department through property taxes principally. But the members responding are all volunteers. Tremendous savings in expense. Back when I was with the county at one time, we did a study. There was a belief that we had way too much equipment in Nassau County and too many firehouses and the rest. And they were comparing us with a place in Virginia that had paid services. So the company come in and I says, I'm going to tell you something right now. When you get done, you'll find out that A, we're less expensive, and B, all that equipment is needed. So they didn't believe that.
Right.
And I let them know, in every time we get a major storm, a hurricane or whatever, you go past any firehouse on Long Island after the storm, and it's empty because the trucks are out on the road,
Yes.
every one of them.
Mm-hmm.
We've got people, if you had a paid situation, you got people who are going to do overtime and triple overtime or whatever with those hours. These
Right.
guys are out free,
Yeah.
doing the work. As we looked at what happened as our involvement in medical services grew and grew, you're purchasing more ambulances, higher levels of equipment that you're using,
Sure.
additional training. It all costs money.
Right.
And many times, if you're in a community, like for us, we've got Sunrise Highway, Seaport, Oyster Bay Expressway, Long Island Long Island Railroad. At times we have patients that we're taking care of that live nowhere near Seaport. They happen to be driving through the community when whatever happened. So the taxpayers in Seaport were paying for his or her medical
Right.
services.
Right.
So there is no reason to exclude just the fire service from this. So we put a bill together to allow the fire departments to bill also. They could use that several ways. They could use it to reduce taxes, to buy additional equipment if they need
Right.
that. And in some cases, because the volume is getting so high,
Right.
and the demand for volunteers is getting high, and many hours, maybe hire a medical technician to have during the areas where your staffing is reduced. So we passed that bill the last 3 years in a row in the Senate.
Yeah.
We thought we had the bill going this year. There was tremendous effort, a lot of editorials and papers around the state. We had a number of press conferences around the state. Last day of session, the Assembly was not going to bring it to the floor. I went over and talked to their chairman of the Ways and Means Committee, and they were not going to bring it to the floor. So consequently, nothing happens.
It's another year where it doesn't pass. Yeah.
Well, you know what? I think, I think we need to exert some continued pressure. The fire service is doing that right now, and I'm not sure, but maybe at some point we may have to ask that we go back into session, because as much as we recognized all the contributions that and contributors to this pandemic, we've ignored this whole group too.
Sure.
Same as your situation. And this is not about making money. They estimated that it's millions of dollars in recoveries,
Right.
which will mean millions of dollars of investment into additional services or reduction in taxes. And for the insurance industry, again, they're charging a premium for that. So they're just being asked to honor their policy.
Right. Right. Yeah, and so, you protect the taxpayer and put the bill where it belongs, back onto the insurance company that's charging for it. I mean, again, you talk about common sense legislation. It seems that way to me, and it's also about getting awareness out and across the state. It's not just the vote of the local people, say in Suffolk and Nassau, that understand that issue, but it's got to be statewide that they understand this issue, and it's going to take some conversations for sure.
Well, there have been a lot. I think statewide there is a recognition, but I think I think we may have hit a home run, except we forgot to step on third base on the way home.
Yeah.
That's where we are right now.
Yeah. Again, from my perspective and from the work that I was doing up there, it was a year unlike any other. The closest year you could maybe compare it to was the year before.
Yeah.
But, now, with the extra fiscal uncertainty as to whether or not the federal government was going to provide the relief that we knew we needed, the priority to get certain bills done that were absolutely COVID-related and needed to be addressed, and then all the other work. From my perspective, a very interesting year. But, I'd love to get your take.
It was more than just an interesting year. Obviously a lot of priorities had to be set. Certainly the response to COVID is number one. how we were addressing the medical emergencies across the state, the lack of various medical supplies as a result of the excessive demand, a lot of non-COVID related issues were in the forefront on certain issues, and then we had a situation where our educational system changed. We went from school day to Zoom.
Right.
And we realized across this state there were many, many communities that didn't have the infrastructure to support that. That's something we absolutely have to address. We realized as we began to bring students back, there were issues, and again, the inability to get the right protective equipment was out there. How we were funding things, increased costs that are going there. My objective when we started the year was a bill that I introduced that would have capped property taxes at 50% of the total school district spending, which would, for many districts, would be a 30% or more reduction in property taxes. That was the primary issue.
Sure.
But with what was happening, we weren't going to get that through. But we're in a situation when you look at how we fund education, oversimplified, you've got property taxes, income taxes / state aid,
Yep.
and commercial property taxes. We have districts in our state that get a tremendous amount of commercial property tax base, a lot of relief on how to fund
Sure.
education. We have a number of school districts that that qualify based on the formulas with significant amount of state aid. And then we have other districts that have little or no commercial property tax. The formulas don't work well for them. And they're paying 60, 70, and 80% of the cost of education by means of property taxes.
Property tax.
And I got people in my community, their annual property taxes are now more money than they bought the house for 30, 40, 50 years ago.
I could believe it.
So one of the things, if we put that cap in, that's going to give a little more equity across the state in distribution. But we couldn't move it forward. And one of the things I was watching a program the other day, and there was a debate on taxes and how we do taxes. And there was a question that exceptionally wealthy people here in our country pay very limited taxes.
Right.
But their wealth is different. We pay taxes on income, not wealth.
Right.
So I was thinking about that the other day, and if you think about it, we, from the school funding, pay income taxes, which is used to basically fund state aid. But we're also taxing people on their wealth, their property.
Right.
And there's a perception there that is wrong. We make the perception, and just for a number, if your house is assessed at $500,000, you have a $500,000 house. You have $500,000 available. But if you have a $450,000 mortgage,
You don't actually have.
you don't. You have a $50,000 house.
Mm-hmm.
You bought the house, pick a number, $200,000 so many years ago, and wow, you made $300,000. No, you didn't. When you start looking at the interest you paid in the mortgage, you may have to sell that house for $600,000 to break even from where you are. So the perception that the value of your house is indicative of your financial condition, number one, is wrong.
I agree.
If you have two houses, one next to the other, and one person has a $450,000 mortgage, just for a number, and the other owns the house free and clear, you're taxed the same way.
Yep.
But you're not in that situation.
Right.
If you're in a situation where you have somebody in the home maybe that's ill and you have tremendous medical expenses,
Sure.
while that helps you on your income tax position, doesn't on the other side. So I believe that we need to change the way we're funding education. We need to move away from property taxes, and I think it has to start with a cap and then work our way down from there. So that's something we're actually starting to work on now for next session.
That makes a lot of sense. It does. And you don't always get fair points like this when speaking to elected officials. It takes the time and experience to educate yourself on the issues. Know, at the heart what the issue is, to be able to sit down and have these conversations. So I definitely appreciate you sharing those thoughts, because I think for a lot of people that's going to be a new idea, something they haven't heard before, that they can consider, and maybe that helps. Well, you're in the fire service. Hopefully it helps it, catch fire and spread.
We gotta make it catch fire. And just so you know, the total cost around the state to cap everybody at 50% is $1.2 billion, which is not a heck of a lot of money at the end of the day.
No.
So we've got to push the buttons more for next year.
We have some new recurring revenue streams. We'll see what those things do. Obviously, there's tons to say there. One other just quick question about session, and then I'll apologize to my co-host for not even giving him
I feel bad.
But we'll give him the final question. But obviously, so much different in many different ways, trying to get things done earlier this year. But one thing that we were noticing was that, the whole in-person aspect to Albany wasn't necessarily what it normally would be. So in order for me to have a conversation with you, it's a phone call, it's a text message, or whatever else. But when you're working with your colleagues, there's maybe some face-to-face work that you're going to do, and then there's going to be, that remote. I don't know if we want to call it Zoom or whatever else. Did you feel like it changed the conversation for better or for worse? Was it a different way of communicating?
It definitely did. I mean, most of your communications with people were Zoom calls. You'd sometimes be looking and there'd be 30 faces on the screen. And, when you're having a conversation, you can kind of see if the communication is there by how somebody's reacting. On Zoom, you don't have that opportunity. So I think it was very, very difficult. And, I'm glad we're starting to see that turn around. But it hurt. I mean, on the one hand, you could have a conversation with a large group of people. We did. Massapequa had a concern about where they stood with the virus and some actions the governor was considering, and we had a Zoom that we also connected to a couple of other devices.
Sure.
And I think at the end there were almost 3,000 views of that Zoom. Now,
Yeah.
You couldn't have done that face to face.
Right.
But at the same time, again, it's watching a TV program almost.
Right.
And doing that stuff. So I think we learned a lot. I think for education and the ability to use Zoom, that tells us that no more snow days. But we've got to fix technology.
Sure.
We learned a lot. We dropped the ball in some places that we have to fix. But I think face-to-face communication is so critically important.
And I know we're definitely, looking forward to that next year, hoping that Albany is open up and using our our experience in having these face-to-face conversations up in Albany to advocate for our members and working people. But Tom, my co-host Tom Moran, Executive Vice President, I apologize. I talk through the whole show like I normally do. Do you have any questions for our senator?
No, the senator and myself, both coming through the fire service, understand what this bill means for the emergency dispatchers. Myself, I understand it being an emergency service dispatcher for 27 years, always feeling like I was a first responder, knowing the help that I've given, whether it's childbirth or CPR instructions. The best way I could describe it, doing those jobs, think of the job that anybody that's listening does and try to do it blindfolded. That's essentially what we're doing in the field. So for the senator and the assembly to push this through and to recognize our population it's great. Thanks, and appreciate all the hard work you did to get this done.
I think we again have to thank you. Actually, we need to thank all your members as well. You know, we had an opportunity during the year, one day, I guess before the pandemic got rolling, we had a chance to have a chat out there, and what was happening in terms of remote working, and that you know there was pluses and minuses for folks. They could get things done at home and take care of what they needed, got the work done. But you know, your entire membership is the support agency for most people in every necessity they have, and collectively, you were that emergency room worker on different issues. You were there, and we could depend on you throughout. So you have to take a bow too. I mean, this as much as we lost a significant number of lives across the country, and we still have many people struggling, it could have been so much worse.
It's very true.
And the fact that your people were coming to work each day, and in certain occupational groups not having the proper equipment because of the shortage that we had, you guys are all heroes, and that's meant as sincerely as it can
Yes.
be. You guys were there when people needed a service; it was there, and you know, and you rolled with the punches when certain things or funds wasn't available. You were still there.
Yep.
So you know, as he was saying, from a first responder's standpoint, once that's in you, you know you have to go, whatever it is.
Right.
We got to do whatever we got to do. You guys collectively did that without complaints, but just that's my job. We got to do this and that, and you found workarounds where they were needed, you know, we wouldn't be this far down the road in recovery if it wasn't for what all of you did collectively.
Well, I appreciate the recognition on behalf of our membership. You know, I agree wholeheartedly. It was public workers along with workers from many different sectors that really helped get all of this working, you know, and to get us to where we are. And again, I just, you know, want to express the appreciation Tom shared for working with us on getting this first responder bill done. We're just waiting on the governor, but it'll be a good day for all of us to know that you know, we finally caught up in that way. And again, for everyone, my guest this morning, Senator John Brooks, the chair of the Committee on Veterans, Homeland Security, and Military Affairs. Thank you again for spending some time with us this morning to talk.
My pleasure. My pleasure.
And Tom, thank you for your input as well.
Thank you, Dan. Thank you, John.
And to our listeners, we'll speak to you next week.